All right, so continuing on, we're going to be talking about it for people who are a little bit older, right? Because it's the same issues that everybody's running in. But as we heard earlier, a lot of it is students, they're children, they're younger. And we can certainly see the effects that it has on them. But when it comes to older, right, it's just as important. So let's start with Russ. You can tell us a little bit, give us a brief intro about yourself, your organization, and kind of what life used to be before the pandemic.
All right. So first off, hello, everybody. I'm Russ Vitale. It's nice to meet all of you. I am the owner of Destination College Success. I've been an independent college counselor for over 16 years, helping people nationwide. We say that we're your GPS to college success. So we help people to successfully navigate the process, do everything except tutoring. Essays, applications, have a proprietary system we use to put college lists together. We do financial aid counseling, interview prep. I'd love to speak with Middle Earth about that. I'd love to help out in a little bit in that capacity there. But athletic recruiting, it's really everything to do with the college process. So, I think that one of the biggest things with and I wanted to kind of chime in on a little different note, because I think that everything that everybody said is absolutely legit, and kids are challenged, parents are challenged, right? The college process was overwhelming and stressful to begin with. And now with things changing all the time and all that, but I've tried to take, and believe me, I've addressed that nationwide. I'm a public speaker on this topic. I talk all the time about this stuff to try to add some levity, some successful ways that they can address this and still stay on track. But I also have seen a lot of resilience from my students. And I do think, in a time of challenge, a lot of times people actually find stuff out about themselves that they didn't know before. And it kind of forces it, because, I talk to my students all the time, and that's where the GPS concept comes in, right? We tend to think that life is a direct linear line from what you want to what you get, right? And we all know as adults, it's all over the place, right? So what happens is you need to get back on track. Exactly, right? Hopefully you make progress, fall back a little bit, make progress, fall back a little bit. Hopefully it's not a drastic decline, right? And I just think that I've used it as an opportunity for my students to really kind of look at it a little differently as a preparation for when they're going to be autonomous on a college campus. Mm-hmm. Right? So when things aren't being told to them how to do this, when to do this, how to study, how to get ready for a test, now they have to do it on their own. And when my students complain about it sometimes, because, technology sometimes has its pros and cons, right? Teachers are challenged, and I'm absolutely empathetic to that. It's unbelievable what our teachers are doing in this state and across the country to try to overcome and address the things that they're challenged with. And a student, it doesn't really think about those things. So instead, what I've tried to do with my students is really try to give them a more positive way of looking at it, so they have more autonomy and they feel more empowered by being able to take steps where, instead of saying, woe's me, it's not what I expected. And I don't downplay that and say it's not important, but I also say, all right, but what can we do to change that? What can we do to make it better? And I just have found that really, most of my students, because everybody's in that same mode of, it's tough, it's challenging, oh my gosh. And it absolutely is. But I say, after we get that, okay, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to make it better? And I just really think that, I actually think it shocks the students. It actually shocks some of the parents too. But I think it shocks the parents that I have that approach. And I actually feel like the best compliment I've been getting over the past year is that every time we talk to you, Russ, we feel better, right? About the process, about just life in general, about whatever. And, I think that that's one of the biggest impacts and changes, not to downplay all the challenges, because there's a ton of them, but just to try to have a little bit different twist and actually look at it as a growing process and something that could really prepare them when they don't have somebody waking them up every day for class in college and telling them, you got to go talk to the teacher and, get true help and be their own self-advocate.
Yep. It's all about the mindset and your outlook. And, when life gives you lemons or life gives you COVID, there's always still something there that you can do with it. So yeah, great. Thanks. How about you, Susan? Can you give a brief intro? Tell us a little bit more about yourself and life before COVID.
Sure. So my name is Susan Alaimo. I have been working with college-bound students for 25 years now. I'm the founder and director of Collegebound Review. Until very recently, our name was SAT Smart. Then College Board informed us that they have the copyright to SAT. So we switched over our name. Don't want to get into a legal fight with College Board. So we are now Collegebound Review, but doing the exact same work. Work in three areas. A big area has always been SAT preparation, SAT and ACT, although our real focus is New Jersey students. And in New Jersey, as well as the East Coast, the West Coast, and Texas, the SAT is typically the test of choice. So I've had small group courses for 25 years, preparing students for the SAT and of course also the PSAT, but we also prepare students for the ACT. And we do small group courses, which before COVID were mostly in person. Joan and I know each other well because I have been offering the course at Immaculata High School as well as other sites for the last 25 years. So Immaculata has great students who I've worked with for many, many years. So in person has always been key. Students like working in groups with other students. We also do a lot of private tutoring for the SAT, PSAT, ACT, and every high school subject, with a lot of demand for AP courses, because AP courses are very, very popular. As you know, they're college level courses. The curriculum's written by College Board, and they've become even more popular now because College Board has done away with SAT-2 exams. So the regular SAT used to be called the SAT-1 reasoning test. People generally just refer to it as the SAT, but there were SAT-2 tests, which are ending in June. And they're also called subject tests. They're 1-hour tests. When I was applying to college decades ago, they were called achievement tests, all right? But colleges wanted to show your expertise in different subjects. And the more elite colleges, the more competitive colleges wanted 2 subject tests. So now that's not going to be an option anymore. So colleges are looking even more to AP exams. So students take AP courses. There's an exam at the end of the year in May. It's a 3-hour exam. So it's much more comprehensive than the 1-hour subject test. And students are graded from 1 to 5. So that's become even more important. I also work with students on the entire college application process, like Russ has talked about as well. I focus on New Jersey students. I've written 2 books on New Jersey students and the college application process, because there are some factors that are mutual all over the country, but there's a lot of criteria specific to New Jersey students. And one area, particularly in central New Jersey, the schools are very, very competitive. And when students are applying to college, they're really in competition with their peers, the students at the same high school. And many students in some of them, in central New Jersey, they find that they have peers who are taking 10, 11, 12 AP courses. I work with students this year, literally, one had 14 AP courses, one had 15 AP courses. When they didn't get into a particular college, I reached out to another counselor and said, your student who got into such and such a college, what were they doing? And she told me, well, they had 19 AP courses. And I mean, it saddens me. I don't want to come across as saying that students should be taking 19 AP courses. It saddens me that to go to the most competitive colleges and getting in from New Jersey, you really have to have done a year or 2 of college already, because most colleges give you credit for those AP courses. So you're literally starting college as a sophomore, sometimes even higher. That's saving you a lot of money, but it is very competitive. So pre-COVID, a lot of this was in person. I really wasn't doing this via Zoom unless people really asked, but most people really favored in person for both the classes, the private tutoring, and the college application process.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Whew.
Sure.
Can't imagine 19. Wow, as a high school student. So.
Student, yeah.
And Dennis,
Yes.
How about yourself?
Myself, Dennis Harabin. I'm the founder of Relax Tax and Relax Teams. And ironically, I've been waiting for this world to take off, not a pandemic to make it happen, but the virtual world since 2008. We've been a Google authorized reseller. We focused on, and we knew that technology would allow this kind of thing to happen. And technically the world was ready for this type of step. And but people weren't ready to do things virtually. So I literally spent the last 8 years looking at the areas that drive personal finance the most. It's insurance, taxes, and debt. I started with taxes because it's CPA and that's the area, but it really wasn't that was impacting people. It was the insurance and debt. And the debt wasn't mortgage, wasn't cars, wasn't credit card, it was college debt. Crippling levels of college debt that were destroying people. So among the things that I did in the 9 years, I actually worked and I had a job with a person recruited me into a job with predictive analytics for the colleges and universities and helped to actually determine and build the software that these colleges use to shape a class, to decide who they're going to bring into that class, and to know exactly how much each student is going to pay while they're in the class. The algorithms and the math that drive it all are all by what impacts, what are most impactful. And zip code, where you're coming from, the competitiveness of the schools and areas. Again, it's not the same for a student out of Iowa or out of Alabama as it is for New Jersey and all those impacts. So from my perspective, it's really about making sure that people they tend to get crazy during this process of getting into college and university, and they never do the math as to whether or not it actually is even worth their student to get into the school. Because if they're not going to graduate, if they're not going to get there, yay, I got in, I get to say that my kid got in for a semester at this school and paid all this money and then ended up not making it, didn't like it, all these other things. So we're really focused on the financial impact it has, not just on the student, but on the family of this college process and the trillions of dollars of debt.
So you were like you were the big data of the college admissions and putting all the pieces and figuring that. That's.
I mean, there's a couple companies out there doing it, but we were the leader in it, in the big data and predictive analytics side, and went to all the college campuses and everything to go out and to all the events. So the business side and the dirty side of the college is that people don't want you to see. I've been in the bowels of.
Nice. So post-pandemic or during the pandemic, Susan, how things impacted what you do and the folks that you serve? You used to meet in person. I guess that's not happening now. What else has changed?
Well, again, I learned Zoom very, very quickly and did the courses via Zoom, do all the private tutoring via Zoom, and learned quickly that it works out very, very well. In the courses, I have them interactive. So luckily, I've been working with high school students for 25 years. So kind of it came naturally. But in the courses, for instance, I tell the students they're interactive. So I call on students. You don't want to make them uncomfortable. So I told students I call on them alphabetically by first name because that's how it appears, on their screen. And so they get called on and they participate in the class, but it's in order. So I'm not kind of catching them off guard. So the thing that I focused on kind of now post pandemic or still in the midst of it is that while almost every college will say SAT scores aren't required, they're still accepting them. And if you have great SAT scores, it's certainly going to benefit you. The only school that's really not allowed to look at them is the University of California, and very few students from New Jersey. Actually, they talk about going to California. It sounds great. Very few actually do. So I tell them to really make the most of their opportunities. 1 million students did take the SAT despite, a lot of the closing. So that sometimes they have to be creative. I honestly recommend it to students that they sign up to take the SAT at Immaculata or at other private high schools because they were very hesitant to close and cancel the SAT. For the most part, they always held the SAT. A lot of public schools, it was beyond their control as to when they were going to close. So I encourage people where they could take it. At Immaculata, Notre Dame High School, the private schools, and particularly the Catholic schools did tend to host it. I
Mhm.
also encourage students to do things like volunteer work. A lot of students say, well, we're limited. You know what? Here's where students have to be creative. There's a website, for instance, it's called Zooniverse, Z-O-O-N, zooniverse.org, and it's all virtual opportunities. And they offer people such a wide span, vast opportunity list of what might appeal to them. In other words, one was you can count penguins in Antarctica using time-lapse photography. So you can sit at your computer in your room and count penguins and submit the data. And that was an opportunity that was very interesting to some students. You could transpose documents from the 1800s. There were letters that historical associations wanted computerized. Clearly, they didn't have computers 200 years ago. So students could transpose those letters. To students who are history buffs, that's fascinating work. So it really helps students show colleges how they could stand up and make the most of, working within the limitations, because the pandemic affected everybody. So everybody's in the same boat, and students had to kind of use their creativity. And that's what I help them do, to stand above the crowd. Because again, colleges are looking at students within a certain demographic, and they're picking those who have shown that they can stand out despite what we're all going through.
Wow. So I haven't transposed anything. I haven't counted penguins, and I certainly have not gone in alphabetical order when asking the questions with the people. So continuing with that, I'm going to ask you the same question though, Russ. How's COVID and the pandemic impacted what you do, the folks that you meet with, and how you serve them?
Yeah, so thank you. So the pandemic has impacted things for sure, but to be honest with you, for about a year and a half before, I was actually moving a lot of my business and my consulting work to online. So I actually knew of Zoom pretty well. It was an easy transition for me. And also, I think from that perspective, for me personally and for my business, it was able to, now people are more receptive and open out of necessity, for these kind of interactions and conversations, even enjoying some of the humor with it if you see the commercials on TV and things like that, right? So it's actually helped me to spread more nationally, and people to be more receptive and say, hey, you know what, this guy sounds like he knows what he's been doing. He has a lot of experience in this. Like, we should bring him in. It doesn't matter that he's not in California. It doesn't matter he's not in Texas, and people are open to these things. So it actually has provided some opportunity from that perspective for me, for sure, to continue to grow and stay, very informed and actually broaden my reach. From the individuals that I serve, I think, the transition for some was a little bit challenging at first, but I actually think because, sometimes, a student needs hands-on kind of guidance or help, or needs to be shown something. So I share my screen with my students all the time and say, okay, hold on. You're not understanding this? No problem. And I show them how to do things, whatever. And I see them, now taking more notes than they were before. I mean, I'm sure anybody who's ever interacted with and, helped teens, you say, are you writing this down? No, I got it. No, write it down, right? So, and now I just think it's more automatic because, and the preparatory stuff, I think is it's just more expected. And to be honest with you, to that end, I think as a result, I actually think that they're getting a lot more from the conversations we're having, because as Dennis said before too, I call it bumper sticker envy, right? So, a lot of students and parents too are too busy looking at brand name schools, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they don't know if it's the right academic place. They don't know if it's the right social place. They don't know if they can afford it. And that's the non-glamorous part of the college process that I feel the pandemic has actually kind of forced them to look at more holistically now and earlier in the process, which I've been trying to get people to do for 15 years. So, I really think that, as a result, there, again, I don't want to say that, the whole glass is half full kind of thing all the time, because there have been challenges and I get that. But I actually do think that this pandemic has actually, encouraged people to actually go beyond the surface level, kind of research. I use that word very loosely, that they were doing for colleges, right? So many students and families say, well, we can't visit the school, so how do we know if it's a good place? Well, I got to tell you, in 16 years of doing this, most people go, don't ask a question. They're like, oh, that was pretty cool. Everybody's playing Frisbee. Or they go, I don't like the school because my tour guide was terrible. Like, wait, hold on a second. Like, there's so much more, right? So not having that, actually, in a way, in my opinion, is actually encouraging them to do a little bit deeper dive and a less superficial view and analysis of their list and the schools they should apply to.
Yeah, so it's giving them a way to change their focus of what they're looking at to what really matters.
Absolutely. I mean, look, most people don't understand how to properly evaluate a college, right? Because you can't be an expert overnight automatically, right? So, and you also can't remove the psychological and the emotional aspect of it because it exists. I mean, my daughter's a high school senior. I've gone through this process not only now with hundreds of students across the country, but now with my own daughter, right? So I know very well, like, what goes on in that process. And I'm not saying that you should totally, parking lot all of that, because that's part of the fun. But at the same time, I do think that this has actually helped people to, and maybe forced might be a better word, but kind of made people say, oh, wait, hold on. I can do this, and it's not the same, but I can learn more real tangible stuff about a school and whether or not it's a match academically, socially, and financially, because I'm doing it this way, instead of just saying, well, yeah, I visited 4 schools in Boston. Oh, it was so cool. It was great. And I enjoyed that too. I love Boston. I love the schools in Boston, but there's so much more to a school than just 1 2-hour visit where you just, where it's almost like data overload.
Sure. And as you were kind of pre-prepared with Zoom and doing everything, Dennis, you were saying you've been preparing for this for what, 12 years, a dozen years?
Yeah, 12 years. I mean, really, I thought I'd be ready by 2012, but yeah, I mean, Google Hangouts. This is the time for Google Hangouts. And then what really dug into was that college area, because that was something, I was a certified college planner, and really looking at it and understanding, I wanted to really get under it. And surprised once I really got under it, you're really surprised what you see and find. And really, when you get down to it, why does college cost so much? I mean, you're talking about the experience, you talk about those things, but you talk about the education and the information and knowledge. So a lot of the colleges aren't even prepared and weren't prepared for virtual. There's a lot more virtual that are better prepared. What the schools have been doing, and I traveled, I went to all these colleges and universities. They were so busy building these megapolis, these big things, and the cost of customer acquisition, it is a business. And they've kept competing to beat the other schools. They kept building bigger buildings. They kept having fancier food in the dining hall. They kept having all this show so that they can get those top 20, top 30 students, so they can get 1,000, 100,000, so they can turn people down. They kept building these fantasy la-la lands that the students, when they get into, when they come out of it, the employers are like, what are you talking about? It's not really like this. So they built this fantasy world that doesn't really exist in the real world. And they're in trouble. They're in a lot of trouble because that cost of customer acquisition, you can't drive down those costs of acquisition. You can't drive down the cost of these buildings, these things they have. Their cost to educate someone has gotten so high, and it's on the cost of customer acquisition. And the real world is starting to realize that I can send my kid with a bunch of other kids, and they're doing this already, where they can have that social environment and they can take Coursera courses from all the top schools, and they can come back and they have more knowledge. The average college and university has a 6-year graduation, and some of them are less than 49%. So 51% of the people over 6 years walk out of there with nothing but a bill. And then when they walk out with nothing but a bill, they have to go and pay for this for the next 20 or 30 years, which puts them so far behind. Where if they invested that same money into having where they're actually taking boot camps, courses, and learning and starting a career, where they're actually getting that education 6 years down the road, those people who are very good at what they do 6 years in, short of being a doctor or something like that, I wouldn't want to say, there's a lot of education, a lot of fields and areas where 6 years ago, it doesn't even exist. So what's going to happen 6 years from now? So it's just about spending that time. And all I do, what I love to do, is just wake the parents up to that and wake the students up to that, to really understand, do you really comprehend how much debt you're putting on yourself? If you were a business, you're bankrupt. and you're going to stay bankrupt for a very long time. Would anyone invest in you? So that's the kind of thing that we do to help people, because it's all about retaining more of what you earn. The reality is you don't have to retain, you don't have to earn as much if you don't have as much debt and other things along what you're doing. And that's what something that the pandemic really opened up to people is like, we've cut back the race, the rat race, the pace at which people are doing things. People are like, I'm doing things a little slow. I think the pandemic, although following what Russ said, there's been a lot of blessings in the pandemic. There's been a lot of curses, but there's been a lot of blessings in the pandemic. The death, obviously, and the destruction, that isn't. But to the average person, it's really been a chance to wake them up, to open some eyes and to do some things. And for me, it just gave me the chance to do what I've been doing and wanting to do for a while. But I've obsessed about learning on that and that college debt piece. Well, you know, when people hear debt, the word college never comes into their mind, even though that's the thing that's crippling so many of them. And don't get me wrong, my Wildcats, my Villanova Wildcats are playing basketball right now. I'm missing it. I'm a little upset. I love my Villanova Wildcats. I'm so proud that I went to Villanova. And in that day and the era, it was the right thing to do. But even then, I told my parents when I was going to Villanova, it was because, you know, there's nowhere else where I want to be education. I want to get the finance. I want to have the degree. I have to go to school. Otherwise, I would have gone to a tech school. And that's just the mentality that I brought to the table. And I've always been an entrepreneur. And that's kind of the thing, is finding that niche and helping people not to leverage too much debt. And that's what we do. And I think the pandemic has given me a chance where people actually will listen. Because we actually created a nonprofit at the NAFTA problem with, it was inspired by an individual called Robert Muhammad, who I've had on some Zooms and things. He's now the director of financial aid for University of Howard. And we were really looking at how the impact, the lack of funds were going to be available for college, and how colleges outprice themselves. And he was more focused on the historical Black colleges and universities. How can their students get out there and get what they need to get? And we talked about project scholarship was all about students doing the project in exchange for scholarship money, and it's instead of having to go out of pocket, instead of having to pay. And it was all about the work. It wasn't about the piece of paper. It wasn't about what they said. It was about the work that was done. The employer couldn't see who they were. They couldn't see the color of their skin. They couldn't see the birth. They couldn't see any of those things. And we agreed that it would be helpful for all people, all demographics, not just for middle-class individuals, for people who had economic impact individuals, because it was really on merit. And too many people, there's too many things that blind that. So we pulled Project Scholarship back for about, during the pandemic, and we'll be launching that heavily with Stevens Institute of Technology and the students there next fall. It's a nonprofit.
With all that technology and things, I heard a very interesting statistic. I just kind of want to share this. You know, when you think of streaming services like Apple Music or Spotify or Pandora, and now even on TV, right, Disney Plus, every TV station seems to have a premium channel. Anybody have an idea of what the most expensive streaming cost subscription is out there? College.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and along that time, but along those same lines, there's actually courses, schools, and universities like Southern New Hampshire and other schools that are actually implementing this. And that's the plan of Project Scholarship, is we will have accredited schools and universities in exchange for the micro scholarships that they're doing. So the students are continuously working. Over the 6 years, they're going to get there, but they don't come a dime out of pocket. They earn it by doing projects, by doing work. And guess what? They actually learn what they're doing. And it's not this fantasy la la land. It's like, this stuff sucks. Yeah, that's work. It's not the real fun stuff.
That's why they call it work. Right?
Exactly. So the projects that are going to get the most people are going to be doing, it's going to be grunt work. Because guess what? Now that we can go virtual, so can the rest of the world, and they're coming hard. The US student doesn't have a clue about how much competition they're facing from the rest of the world, who, just like they can pipe in from Aspen, are piping in from everywhere else. And we're in big trouble if we don't have our students ready for that, because you're competing against people at $3 an hour who will do anything for you. And that's reality. And that's what people are missing.
So don't hold back and let us know how you really feel about this, Dennis. It's okay.
And again, I love America. I want these students to. That's why I'm so passionate. That's why Project Scholarship is all about, just getting more for less.
So out of all of that, if you could boil down what you just said into, you know, kind of the one key nugget, what's the one point that you want people to take away from that? Just one.
The one key thing is be careful of how much debt you acquire and really look at what the long-term consequences of that are. If you would you pay that for anything else? And does it make sense? And does it really make sense?
It's a great consideration. Russ,
Yeah.
how about you?
Okay, so
Key point.
thank you. So I think most important is that a happy child is a successful child. I don't truly believe that you have to go about this process with more stress and anxiety than it already entails and is included. I'm a best-selling author. My book, College, Making the Complicated Easy, that's what I talk about. And with some people who say, get into your dream college, all that nonsense, whatever. And look, your dream college, I support students like that. I have kids in every Ivy League school across the country, whatever, but it's not all about that. A happy child is a successful child. To Dennis's point, you want to find, the goal is not to get into college. Once students and families go, my student got in, they think they're done, but that's when it actually starts. And if you do the right work beforehand, you will put your child in the right place to be successful academically, socially, and at a price you can afford, which is happy for the whole family. So to me, I really truly believe that you need to become an educated college consumer, and there's lots of different ways to do that. My company has things you wouldn't believe how incredibly ridiculously affordable it is, from group instruction to individual. You can get the help you need if you need it. And by the way, we are very honest with you as to even if you need it. We do a free consultation and we'll let you know and fully disclose everything. And I will be the first one to tell you, you don't need us. You're good. You can do this yourself. But an educated college consumer is what every person should try to be. So that way they can make good choices going forward. And then the last thing I'll just say is it's something that I call a Russism, and all my students say this all the time, but it sounds obvious. The college list drives everything. And most people put that list together based on emotion, ratings and rankings, which I think are a complete waste of paper and time. And therefore they have no idea if it's the right fit, again, academically, socially, or if they can afford it. And as a result, they just forge ahead and have no understanding. And unfortunately, that's why 51% of college students don't finish where they start.
Susan.
Well, my words of wisdom are for students to identify what their passion is. They really should think through what they like, what they want to do in life, and then spend their high school years trying to aim for that. Whether it's in volunteer work, whether it's a job, getting experience. I had one student who I worked with for SAT prep and tutoring and college applications, for instance, and she was passionate about biology, she told me, and drawing. So I did some research on her behalf and told her about a medical illustrator, a position where you can actually draw medical pictures and it's a great career. So I try to really help students find their niche. And once students find their niche, then colleges like students who have direction. When I was applying to college decades ago, they wanted Renaissance people. You had to have, I remember joining a sport, even though I'm very uncoordinated, because you had to have a sport on your resume and you had to have a part-time job and you had to have volunteer work, you had to have everything. Colleges don't want Renaissance people anymore. All right. They realize you don't need to be good at everything. They don't want people who can kind of play the guitar and kind of play football. They want people great at something. So I try to help students early on identify their passion and then put their time and efforts into pursuing that dream in high school and then moving on into college.
One last question. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Susan?
Thank you for asking. Students can reach us at info@collegeboundreview.com or at our website, www.collegeboundreview.com, or call us at 908-369-5362. And I'm always willing to answer any questions. We offer free consultations to help people decide if and when they do need any of our services. So thank you for including me.
Great. And thanks for being here. Russ, your contact information, please.
Great, thanks so much. On Facebook, we're Destination College LLC. On the web, we're destinationcollegesuccess.com. And our phone number is 973-944-8770. And you can call anytime. And we do, like I said, a free 45-minute consultation with families to answer a lot of your questions, assess your needs, and see if we're a good fit for you.
Doing great. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for the
And
opportunity.
last but not least, Dennis,
Oh,
best
you
way
can
for people to get in touch with you.
You can find me at relaxtax.com.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the insights. It's been very informative and some things I would have never even thought about. So thank you very much.
Stay healthy and safe, everybody.
Thank you, Paul, for doing such a great job as moderator, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.